kick off promptly, and I'm looking for apologies. I know I've had apologies from Councillor Hassel. Don't believe that there's any others that I'm due. No? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll note those. Item 2 for tonight is members' interest. Does anybody have any members' interest to declare? No? Oh, thank you, Councillor Pitt.
If it's relevant, a member of St Neots Town Council regarding item 6, market towns, and number 9 as well.
Thank you very much. Are there any that need to declare? No. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Pitt. In which case we move into the main body of the meeting and item 3, which is the infrastructure and funding statement. And Councillor Sanderson, I'm expecting you to take the lead on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. You expect correctly. We took this report to scrutiny last week, as members will know, but I'll just summarise briefly. We're obviously required to do this, produce this no later than and approve no later than the 31st of December. So I think it's just important to mention that this covers a period 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 23. So there are some data in here, particularly relating to some of the 106 projects that have actually now progressed, but won't be included in this this report. We're asked to approve the statement on the infrastructure projects or types of infrastructure which the council intends will be or may be wholly or partly funded by CIL, as stated in paragraph 2.5 in the IFS, and delegate authority to the Chief Planning Officer in consultation with myself to make any final amendments to the IFS if necessary. We did have quite a thorough debate at scrutiny, as I mentioned, and I'm just going to sorry, I do apologise. I've lost the scrutiny comments, which isn't very helpful. So there was a couple of questions from members. Councillor Pickering actually, one relating to Loves Farm, and I think that just highlights some of the time lag we have with these. Claire Burton, I know the lead officer on this, has done a good job in chasing up a lot of the statutory organisations. One thing you will notice in here is that we don't have a statement from the County Council. They'll do that separately. Councillor Gladdo, the chair, actually did very correctly, in my view, say, well, perhaps that's something we can highlight in the report and just say that they will be producing their own version, because, of course, that relates to education and highways, etc. And some of Councillor Pickering's comments related to the NHS and allotments, and he will obviously be expecting an answer, so I'll ensure that that's happened. Councillor Gardner mentioned a project at Spaldwick. Again, details will be circulated to him. Councillor Harvey and Gladdo mentioned, and they were given the answer, that the in-kind payments reference will be projects which would deliver infrastructure or other beneficial schemes in place of cash payments. And they also, Councillor Pickering and Harvey also asked a question, and the answer is that the majority of the money, as highlighted on page 39 of the report, was accounted for by virtue of it being allocated to projects. And as you know, a CIL funding round is currently live at the moment. So I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Does anybody have any questions? No? Oh, Councillor Wakeford.
Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you. In absence of questions, it's an observation simply that it's a full and helpful statement. I think the notes back on scrutiny are useful, and I attended the meeting and heard the discussion as well. You're right, Councillor Sanderson. It was fairly full, but fundamentally, I don't hear anything existentially challenging about the report in any of that. So I'm quite content for this to move forward, which is no. In terms of the brevity of this debate, is no reflection on the weightiness of the document, but I think it's had careful work and scrutiny already.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford, and I think I would concur as well. The lack of questions is not a reflection on the report. So we have before us tonight two recommendations. The first is to approve the statement. So in a minute, I'm going to look for somebody to propose, which I'm assuming might be Councillor Sanderson. He's nodding at me. And then we've got a recommendation to delegate. But is there somebody who could second this for me, please? Councillor Pitt, thank you very much. So can I have a show of hands in just a moment? Let me just read the statement of all those who are in favour of approving the statement on the infrastructure projects or types of infrastructure which the council intends will be or may be wholly or partly funded by the SIL stated at para 2.5 in the infrastructure funding statement. All those in favour, please show. Okay, so that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And then in B, the recommendation is to delegate authority to the Chief Planning Officer in consultation with the Executive Councillor for Strategic Planning to make any final amendments to the IFS if necessary prior to publication. So again, can I have a show of hands, all those who are content to delegate that authority? Thank you. Again, carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. In which case, I'm just going to dot back because in the moment when my microphone wasn't on, I actually skipped over the minutes which I'd announced without the microphone and then completely forgotten to go back to with a microphone on. So you've had the minutes from the 14th of November. They've already been shared. Is everybody content that I sign those as a true record of the meeting? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We don't have a copy with us tonight. I will sign those after the meeting. So jumping forward again then, we now move to item 4, which is the Community Infrastructure Levy update. And Councillor Sanderson, this is you again, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is slightly different from the last report. This is purely focused on community infrastructure levy. And it says in the executive summary, just to run through what SIL does. And obviously what we're trying to achieve here is to help deliver our corporate plan priorities, creating a better Huntingdonshire, which we would like to see. So improved housing is mentioned in there, maintain the level of new housing delivery, which meets the needs of Huntingdonshire residents. Forward-thinking economic growth, influencing delivery of infrastructure such as East West Rail, A428, A141 and future transport strategies. In April 2020, Cabinet then approved a revised approach to the governance arrangements. And as you know, we've commissioned some work to look at some new SIL governance. Just 3 projects in here that were for over 50,000. And they did an extension on time, the first being Warboys Village Hall, second one being the Wheatsheaf Junction improvements, which as members probably recall, that's in Somersham. There was a very serious accident that included, unfortunately, some fatalities a few years ago. That project will now be starting in the spring. I'm pleased to say the land issues have been sorted out. So happy to give the extension of time on our contribution there, obviously, because it's a very important project. And the third one is the Ramsey Skate Park. So the 3 recommendations for those projects are detailed there. The scrutiny panel were a little less vocal in their comments then, but nonetheless they did give it careful consideration. Councillor Gardner, of course, very kindly recognised the positivity behind getting that project at Wheatsheaf Junction progressed. That was really the main fallout from that contribution to the scrutiny panel. And again, I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Does anybody have any questions? No, in which case I was only going to comment. I'm particularly pleased to see the improvements to the junction. That's very welcome. In which case then, Cabinet, you have before you 3 recommendations. They are on page, sorry, I'm just trying to see a page number. It's the second page of the report. And so the 3 recommendations I'm going to read to you in just a moment. But firstly, can I have a proposer? Is that you, Councillor Sanderson? Thank you. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pitt. And then the 3 recommendations, I'm going to propose that we take them on block if that's acceptable to Cabinet. So the 3 that you have, A is to agree the extension of time to the Warboys Village Hall project until the 30th of March 2025. B is to agree an extension of time for the Ramsey Skate Park project to the 31st of December 2025. And C is to agree an extension of time for the B1040 Wheatsheaf Road, Somersham Road, St Ives Accident Reduction Scheme project until the 30th of September 2025. All those in favour of those recommendations, please show. Thank you. Again, unanimous. Thank you very much. We're making good progress through tonight's agenda. So, item 5 is the non-domestics rates rural settlements list. That's not an easy thing to say, and I'm hoping that Councillor Ferguson can manage to say those words in a clearer form than I've managed. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an annual task that we have to do, we're required to do, is prepare a list of rural settlements. And so rural settlement is defined as a town or parish with a population of less than 3,000. And the reason why we do that is that those towns and villages, for certain types of businesses, which is post offices, village shops, public houses and petrol stations, can get actually 100% reduction on their business rates. 50% is paid for by the government and 50% is discretionarily awarded by HDC. It's a little bit more complicated than that because there are parishes which have grown to more than 3,000, quite a small number, in which we've been able to split them up by certain demographic profiles, just so that the businesses within that area, or those businesses within that area, can still claim the rural rate leave. And as we all know, that those kind of shops are often the heart of communities. It's important to keep them, and we need to give them every single opportunity we can to survive. So giving them the opportunity to have rates relief is really important. This paper was very uncontroversial because it doesn't suggest any changes to those designations. We brought the paper last year in which some of those kind of special areas, because there was no longer any business there, were kind of combined back into standard rural settlements. In terms of overview and scrutiny, this was entirely uncontroversial and non-political. And I think the view of ONS was that, this is mainly an administrative exercise, and probably one that doesn't need to be scrutinised by them too much. I mean, I think they trust us to take the best decisions we can for rural communities, and I think they were happy. I mean, it's something we'll have to do. That this might be something in the future that we consider doing under delegation, and perhaps report back to ONS if there are any changes. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Pitt.
I have to say, I think our opposition colleagues may not trust us with every single element regarding rural communities, but hopefully on this specific item, they may trust our good intentions. But I'm sure I heard a little voice in my ear then, as you said those words, that I had to mention it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. I thought I was the only one hearing that little voice. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Yeah, I must admit, as a newer councillor a few years ago, I was intrigued to first get a paper on rural business rates relief. And as I think Councillor Ferguson described well, there is a measure of artistry in the painting of settlement boundaries in order to maximise the benefit of the relief available to those critical rural businesses, and I think it's right that we maintain that. So, despite that that interest, I do tend to agree that if there isn't a statutory requirement for us to do this formally annually, some sort of delegation and reporting back, provided there's some political consensus around that, sounds a better use of council meeting time. But we can take that away, I'm sure.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. In which case, I can see nobody else signaling. So, Councillor Ferguson, are you happy to propose the recommendation?
I am.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Somebody other than Councillor Pitt? Oh, Councillor Pitt, you're quick again, so thank you very much. In which case, the recommendation you have before you tonight is to approve the Huntingdonshire District Council's rural settlement list for publication by the 31st of December 2023 to facilitate the award of the rural business rates relief, I managed to say it this time, for the financial year commencing the 1st of April 2024. So can I have a show of hands, please? All those in favour? Thank you. And again, unanimous. Thank you very much. In which case, then that moves us on to the Market Towns Programme winter update. These seem to come around remarkably quick, Councillor Wakeford. I can't believe it's a winter update already, but over to you. Sorry, Councillor Pitt.
Let's check on the procedural basis. So I think it's a non-disclosable interest. So if you could advise me if you feel it's appropriate for me to leave the room now or at any point in the agenda item, I'd be much obliged.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Pitt. This is by virtue of you being a member of the Town Council. Again, I think this is an update, and therefore there's no direct decisions being made. Therefore, you wouldn't be unduly influencing wearing a different hat. So I think it's quite appropriate for you to stay. And also, just for completeness, under Section 25 of the Localism Act, if you had formed an opinion elsewhere, the Localism Act says, providing you have an open mind, you're able to participate again. Just for completeness. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that advice. In which case then, Councillor Wakeford, over to you.
Thank you, colleagues. Councillor Comboy, there is a slight element of trickery in the perception of speed you just described, which is that the quarterly report for, was it autumn, if I'm getting my seasons right, because we're in sort of real as opposed to political seasons, aren't we, with these reports, actually came 2 months ago rather than 3 to facilitate me reporting while I was in the country. So this is a relatively recent update from when you last heard from us, which is partly why you will be pleased to know, particularly those several colleagues who were in the room at scrutiny and did hear me run through this in some detail. I'm not going to do the same. This is the first of 2 papers on the Market Towns programme this evening, one under part 2 that we'll pick up a little later. Colleagues will be mindful of the distinction between the matters we can discuss in the 2. In terms of the main quarterly update report then for this section of the agenda, the sort of main news with respect to St Neots is that work has now started in the town centre improvements. The works themselves the literal spades in the ground will be the other side of Christmas, beginning of January, to avoid impacting on Christmas light switch-ons and so on. The contractors who we've now appointed have judged that it wasn't really worth or necessary to start works and then stop again for a short period before Christmas. So without any impact on the time scale set out in Figure 1 in the paper, the literal spades will be in the ground from January, but I talked about metaphorical spades in the ground already. Work to mobilise the contractor, pulling the teams together, ordering materials, and preparations are already started with the contractor in contract. So that is good news. I was asked at scrutiny whether in enabling no impact on Christmas light switch on in St Neots this Christmas, we could give certainty about no impact on Christmas lights next Christmas as well. I must underline on that the project plan is as set out in Figure 1. So we are anticipating and allowing for a full 12 months. So we are not able to promise that works will be completed this side of Christmas light switch on next year. So that is Christmas 2024. But we will, of course, do our damnedest to see if that can be possible. And in the event it is going to be, we will update timescales and ensure planning can be made around that. But certainly there won't be interference this year. We've had significant progress towards refurbishment of the Priory Centre as well, another part of the so-called Future High Streets elements of the St Neots parts of the Market Towns programme. So we've identified a preferred option with some very impressive contractors that we're working with, and there will be further discussions with the town councillors, as some around the table are well aware of, around the mechanics of that over the next few weeks. Otherwise, there are various smaller issues covering multiple of our market towns discussed in the paper. I think in interest of time and not to neglect any particular towns, but it's probably specifically worth touching on the question raised in the paper about the shopfront grant scheme. Colleagues will be aware this has proved extremely popular in Huntingdon and St Neots, where we've launched it with monies that were specifically I'm being corrected on my market sounds. It has been a long day. Thank you, Councillor Pitt. Let me start that again. Huntingdon and St Ives, where we've launched it, with money that was specifically earmarked for those two towns that had been unspent, that we inherited. But we have managed to identify funding sources to extend that to Ramsey and also St Neots. Which certainly went down well at scrutiny. Frankly, they were lobbying for that before we were able to commit that that was an option as well. In St Neots, that is funded initially by repurposing money that was earmarked for the co-retail project that was going to be planned for this side of Christmas, but that hasn't proved possible with the CIC we're working with. So that project remains sort of parked, but available for resurrection later. So the question for Cabinet on that is do we support extended a shopfront grant scheme to those two market towns as well, in advance of us doing a renewed comms push around it from the measure of correspondence we've had back from businesses in St Neots and Ramsey already, seeking to apply even though they weren't eligible. I think my steer to Cabinet is that we probably do wish to do that, but I'd be keen for views. Otherwise, I will leave it there, colleagues, but happy to pick up. You know what? Let me turn to scrutiny specifically. I've made reference to certain areas of discussion. So we did talk, as ever, about the plans for managing the replacement of the trees with a greater number of trees on the market square, and discussion around communications planning for that. We discussed the blue badge situation as well, and we are committed as a council to not reducing the number of blue badge spaces available in the middle of St Neots, but unfortunately there are some spaces that are not going to be available in their current locations once the works have taken place. So we're ensuring that an equivalent number are made available as close as possible in nearby HTC car parks, and then some of those then become back available on the market square again when the works are complete. And there was a specific question about finance from Councillor Jennings, who always has an eye for detail for these things, unsurprisingly, and he had identified that there was a change in the amount of declared spend with respect to the CPCA monies, I think it was, in the Market Towns programme, and we committed to go away and check before giving a definitive answer. But the answer I gave provisionally on the evening was that we had potentially recoded spend from CPCA against the Future High Streets pot, so coding spend against pots that need to be spent fastest in order to maximise our flexibility with money. That is what's happened, as a little arithmetic between those two budget lines shows you. So one of them has gone down by a little amount since 2 reports ago, and the other has gone up by a corresponding amount. So the total amount recorded as spent on the scheme hadn't changed. We did, of course, discuss that is only recording the amounts formally coded as spent, so it doesn't reflect the amounts contracted, which is why it looks like there hasn't been spend in some months in the scheme when, of course, a lot of work is happening and liabilities are being incurred, but money hasn't actually been drawn down and transferred across. I will now leave it there. Councillor Conboy, open to questions and comments about shopfront grants in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakefield. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
For residents of St. Neots who are walking about the town centre, what are the first things that they're going to notice happening so they know this program has started? If they're walking down the street, what are they going to notice first?
well, they're going to notice a range of things, Councillor Devonport-Ray, including works on the high streets, including parts of the Market Square being fenced off with signage that we are taking the opportunity to explain what's happening in the project rather than leaving empty grey walls, which we thought was a useful opportunity to help people understand what's going on. That won't be covering up more than a third of the Market Square at any one time. So while there will be a measure of impact on the markets, they will be able to continue uninterrupted, just with a little adjustment of placement on the square. So those are key.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. So it's a really packed report, and I think it reflects. Really feels like these projects are ramping up, and perhaps they're coming as they come closer to delivery. There's a lot going on, and so I'm really grateful to our officers and to you. I think both as a district and a town council, there's a really good dialogue going across the members of both of those councils, which is really helpful to ensure this project delivers, at the highest level that it possibly can. So Blue Badge provision in the high street and in the town centre generally, it's a really key issue. I think we're at the mercy somewhat of sort of more robust specifications for what counts as a Blue Badge bay, and unfortunately our streets aren't going to get any wider. So we've got a challenge, and I just hope that I believe that we are, making sure that there's no stone that's unturned to maximise the delivery of those Blue Badge and maintain that at the most convenient places for our residents. So on a vaguely similar note, I think the market, we're going to have this lovely new market square at the end of this process, but it's going to be a period of disruption, and that's inevitable. But what we really need to do is to ensure that market survives that process. What we don't want is a dwindling market. It's a critical mass that we need to maintain. And I think one of the issues I know we've talked about is ensuring we've got the power supplies that those traders need. And I really hope, again, we just absolutely push at every button to ensure that we provide the most seamless continuation of their business throughout that process. And I know we've had some good conversations about that, so thank you. Co-retail, I think that's a really great idea, and I do hope we can find a way through to reignite that project, because I think it brings a lot of value to the town. And then on to Shopfront grant scheme, I think there's been a lot of enthusiasm from all sorts of quarters, so I'm really keen that we do that. Just to share, I was a party to a conversation around that scheme when it was being considered. Well, it was being investigated by someone in St Neots, and they were looking at, can they use it to improve the accessibility of their shop. And I think it's a really good call. I'd really like for this scheme to include not just making it visually more attractive, but if we can also include opportunities to improve the accessibility for people in wheelchairs and motorized disability vehicles, sorry, I forget the name of it, and just people in buggies. I think that would be really helpful, really good use of this fund. So if we could find a way of including that into the criteria, or a way of encouraging residents to apply, including that, would be really good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. Councillor Wakeford, and then Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. Yes, I'm at that transition point between pram and buggy with my younger child, so I have a considerable degree of empathy in recent years. In reverse order on that, as you alluded to. The purpose of the Shopfront grant scheme is to help encourage footfall with our independent businesses in the middle of our market towns. And crudely, that is not just a question of making them look prettier, but is also making them easier to use, to access, more attractive in more than a visual sense. So accessibility improvements are part of the scheme criteria at the moment. I think we have been thinking on a very similar wavelength, though, Councillor Pitt. So particularly in the context of the impact of the Future High Streets works in St Neots on improving other areas of accessibility in the town centre, around drop curves and cracked pavements and that sort of thing. The opportunity of further comms around the scheme that provides sort of additional emphasis around accessibility improvement opportunities is definitely one that is doable for us, and I'm keen that we do that. It needn't be confined to St Neots either. So we can ensure that applicants are made aware of the possibility, particularly while they are applying for something else as well. If they lack, for example, step-free access, considering the scope to add in an element of their bid to assist in covering that, or indeed potentially to cover it, depending on merits of the application. You raised other points, which I agree with, but I think in interest of time, Councillor Conboy, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Ferguson.
Just wanted to add my support to the comments about accessibility. We want to attract more people to spend their money in St Neots with St Neots businesses, and that means allowing people with disabilities to get into town and park safely, to move about town, which is a drop curb issue, which I know we're going to try and solve some of, and through county council and town council, we're going to try and solve those other issues. I hope there's a meeting tonight discussing LHI bids. So I've been walked around the town or with Liz Owen, who's in a wheelchair, and just tried to move around St Neots town centre and seen how difficult it is, and also to get into some of the shops. So I think about 24% of the UK population have some sort of disability. So it makes absolute sense for those businesses to give accessibility to those people, because otherwise there's a moral imperative for doing that, but also it's leaving lots of money on the table if you can't get people into your shop as well. So anything we could do to support that. But on the general principle of the storefront grants or the shop improvement grants, when we discussed this originally with a wide group of stakeholders, not everybody was enthusiastic about it, but having seen the comments from the public and from business holders themselves, I can tell it is really a very popular thing, and I'm willing to say that I was probably wrong on that, and willing to support this now as well. So thank you very much for searching out that money and making it available, because I think it will be highly appreciated in St Neots.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful, Councillor Ferguson. And one of the other points that the experience so far of the Shopfront Grant Scheme have shown us is that our local entrepreneurs, our local businesses who we knew were enterprising and innovative are even more so than we'd anticipated. So some of the grants have been for substantially less money than we'd potentially planned for. So the creativity in stretching relatively small amounts compared with the maximum grant size, which means the grants can go even further than we anticipated, which is one of the reasons why we do have the opportunity to broaden out the emphasis of what we're covering. And you mentioned that we're trying to improve the accessibility of St Neots with respect, I think, to the Future High Streets work. Of course, we'd be delighted and would see the expanded Shopfront Grant Scheme as an opportunity to contribute expanding the accessibility of all of our market towns covered by the Market Towns programme, and of course we look to work with other stakeholders more broadly as well with respect to the critical importance, as you say, of accessibility across the district being built into things. There's planning elements there's infrastructure planning elements that are beyond immediate discussion, but I could concur entirely with the specific and broader point you were making.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. And of course, not all disabilities are necessarily visible. Some are hidden. So I think there's an awful lot that our high streets could be encouraged to do. As one of the dementia groups was explaining, even things like black doormats sometimes visually can appear as a black hole to some people in terms of what they perceive. So they don't see it as a doormat, they see it as a gap. Would somebody on that side of the chamber like to wave? Because we've obviously sat too still too long, which is why the automatic lights have gone. That's it. Thank you very much. Have come into play. On that note, then, we are asked to note the progress and note and provide feedback, which we've done. Unless there are any other issues, I'm going to move us on. Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. Yes, please.
May I suggest? So I believe we don't formally need to minute a decision because we've got the relevant authorities, but we will certainly, in summary of that debate, note the intention to expand the Shopfront Grant Scheme to St Neots and Ramsey, to get my market towns correct, with that particular emphasis around accessibility. So we will formally announce that in due course, but that is a heads up for those who may be watching the live stream.
Thank you. I'm sure that will be well received. Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. In which case, then, we move on to our next item for this evening. You have already had a copy of the Hinchingbrook Country Park Joint Report. We are being asked to note it, but I noticed that Councillor Taylor has moved her mic closer. Councillor Taylor, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick summary on it, really. We have had Parks Apprentice, who's undertaken a national course, and further training for the park rangers is ongoing. We've got 2 volunteers, taken on weekend roles, which is quite unusual for volunteers. So that's really good, and they're undergoing training. So that's in order to allow a more flexible rota. Within the community, the team continues to work to develop community relationships for the satellite sites around our district, rewilding and ecology training for the rangers being undertaken. In events, we've had our Halloween, which was again a sellout success and had been staffed by volunteers, which had helped minimise the cost. I do believe they've just set up the Christmas grotto, and the plans are underway as well. I think, Chair, you are aware of this, but there's going to be a special weekend dedicated to visitors with special educational needs and disabilities. And of course, it's not just exclusive for them, because it's whoever would prefer a quieter experience. They are welcome to come as well. Finance, the sales in the shop and cafe have increased, and a new staffing structure within the cafe have been accommodated in the new budget. So all in all, they've been really working hard. So I'm really pleased with all the rangers, the volunteers, and the countryside park, as well as all our satellite sites. Couldn't work without our volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Can I also put on record my thanks on behalf of the administration as well? Our volunteers really are the lifeblood of the work that we do. They give their time so willingly and so selfishly, but they make such a difference. So I also agree with that. It is really lovely to see the events that have been happening across our spaces, but particularly at Hinchingbrook. And I particularly am excited about the fact that the grotto will accommodate a wide range of needs. We go back to the conversation again about disabilities, and actually that it's particularly lovely because if you arrive as a parent and say, my child's needs are, and this would help, Father Christmas will magically accommodate those needs. I think that's really a rather lovely way for people to be able to celebrate the festive season. So thank you very much. And Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I wanted to stress how much I enjoy the creativity of the volunteers as well in thinking about new income streams and how to use their space to the best benefit of that park. Can you tell us more about Santa Paws?
This event started last year. That was the first event that it took. I haven't actually been down there, so this is the second year, and it's always very popular, and it's a sellout. Yeah, it's a very doggy event, really. So yeah, it's popular.
So, Councillor Taylor, are you telling me that I need to find a dog to borrow to go and visit Father Christmas?
It might help.
Thank you very much. I have a feeling that I'm about to be lent rather a lot of dogs to walk at Hinchingbrook. Councillor Pitt.
I just want to chip in as well about that, the impact of those volunteers. I mean, I think it's all too easy to overlook it. So we've made a really big, HEC's made a really big investment in Hinchingbrook Country Park, and that's being played out in the improved facilities. And I think the thing we often forget when we make these financial investments is a long-term human capital that comes with that. If we can inspire people to get involved in our built assets and open spaces, that's something that we should probably include somewhere in when we look at the the costs involved and the outcomes. So really delighted to hear that that's one of the outcomes of this fantastic investment.
Thank you very much. Well, that's a lovely note on which to conclude the public part of this meeting, and a festive note too. At this part of the meeting, we move to item 8. And for those who are watching online, this will be the point at which I will read out the exclusion of the press and public statement. If you're joining us for the first time and you wonder what this is, it'll be because there will be a part of the agenda which is confidential and restricted. We do publish those that information online as to why we restrict it. It often is around commercial sensitivity, but you can find that information online if you wish to look in more detail. So the item 8 is the exclusion of the press and public, to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting because the business to be transacted contains exempt information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. And with that, I wish those online good night. I hope you might join us tomorrow for full council, but a happy Christmas for those of you who don't. And we will end our live stream.